In the early 1970s, there was a very strict influx of traffic laws being put into place nationwide. The biggest was the National Maximum Speed Law that was set to go into effect in 1974, which lowered the highway speed limit from an average of 70 to 55. Brock Yates, a well-known writer for Car and Driver magazine, wanted to protest this. He spoke to his friend Steve Smith, who was an editor for Car and Driver, and figured out the perfect way to do this. Back in 1933, Edwin Cannonball Baker drove from New York to Los Angeles in 53.5 hours, setting a record for the fastest time driving from coast to coast. Yates decided to recreate Cannonball Baker's famous run, so on May 3, 1971, Yates, along with some friends, drove a modified Dodge van they called the Moon Trash 2 from Manhattan's Red Ball Garage to the Portofino Hotel and Marina in Redondo Beach, California. Seeing how much fun this was, he decided to take it up a notch. A few months later, Yates organized a race, which he called the Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Trophy Dash, which was a mouthful, so most people called it simply the Cannonball Run. The race in May was just a trial run, and the first official race was set to go on November 5th, 1971. The entry fee for the race was $250. The rules were simple. All competitors will drive any vehicle of their choosing over any route at any speed they judge practical between the starting point and destination. The competitor finishing with the lowest elapsed time is the winner. Yates drove with Dan Gurney, who was the winner of the 1967 endurance race, 24 Hours of Le Mans. They took turns driving his blue Ferrari GTB4 Daytona and won the first race with a record time of 35 hours and 54 minutes. In March of 1972, Car and Driver wrote an extensive article about the illegal race, which increased the size of the contestants for race number 2. In 1975, Time magazine wrote an article about the race, which caught major mainstream attention. Roger Corman got wind of this, and after the success of Death Race 2000, wanted to fast-track another race movie, but have it based on the Cannonball Run. Cannonball was released on September 8, 1976, but even that was beaten to the punch by another Cannonball Run-inspired film, The Gumball Rally, which hit theaters on July 28, 1976. Stuntman director Hal Needham was friends with Yates and wanted to join him for the 1979 run. He had a custom-built 1978 Dodge B200 van, complete with a modified suspension and a Hemi engine. The van had a 90-gallon gas tank with 4 filler necks, so when they stopped to get gas, they could fill up 4 times as fast. The vehicle cost about $60,000. He had a brilliant strategy for being able to go as fast as they needed to without worrying about the police. Needham had the van painted to look like an ambulance and acquired EMT jumpsuits. In case they got pulled over by the police, he brought along a doctor friend from UCLA and Brock's wife to act like their patient. They were, in fact, pulled over, but the team was ready for them. They told the police the patient had to get to a hospital in California, and due to a severe lung condition, she couldn't be flown. The police didn't want to interfere due to being afraid of being sued if she died, so they let them go. Despite the brilliant disguise, they still lost the race that year due to a blown transmission about 50 miles from the finish line. This ended up being the last official Cannonball Run race. Yates started turning the events of the last race into a script he called Coast to Coast. Yates worked with Needham and wanted to make this the definitive film on the race. Producer Al Ruddy came on board to help with financing. Ruddy had previously worked with Needham on The Longest Yard, although back then he was still doing stunts and hadn't directed yet. They had a major Hollywood star in mind for the lead, Steve McQueen. Unfortunately, McQueen wasn't able to do the film after he announced that he had terminal cancer. This put things on hold. In the meantime, Yates wrote Smokey and the Bandit 2. They wanted to fill the movie with numerous leading actors and actresses, but nobody was interested. Finally, Ruddy contacted financing to get approval on something. He wanted to make Burt Reynolds an offer for the lead in Cannonball Run. $5 million for 4 weeks' work. This would make him the highest paid actor in history up to this point. Ruddy called Needham, who was in the middle of shooting Smokey 2, and said, "Tell Burt we're willing to pay him $5 million for 4 weeks. We'll send over a script soon." 10 minutes later, Needham called back and said, "Burt wants to make sure. 5 for 4, right? He's in. Don't bother to send the script." After they had Reynolds on board, other actors were suddenly interested in the film. They were able to hire a virtual who's who of famous people from the day. Dean Martin, Roger Moore, Farrah Fawcett, Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Farr, Jack Elam, Terry Bradshaw, and more. Reynolds requested to bring in his longtime friend Dom DeLuise since he needed someone he really played well with. The character of Fenderbaum was originally offered to Don Rickles. He liked the script, but was annoyed that Dom DeLuise was in the cast. He said DeLuise wasn't as big a star in Vegas as he was, and refused to do the film if he was considered one of the leads. With Rickles out, they hired Sammy Davis Jr. to play the part. They hired Jackie Chan to play the part of himself, or as he's listed in the credits, Subaru Driver Number 1. This was Jackie's second American film, with the first being Battle Creek Brawl in 1980. At some point, they changed the name of the script from Coast to Coast to The Cannonball Run. The original script, as it was written with Steve McQueen in mind, was more of an action movie. Over time, it evolved to become more and more ridiculous. Being a stuntman, Needham wanted to fill the movie with some incredible stunts that had never been done before, both innovative and funny. Even with the $5 million going to Reynolds, the budget was still relatively average for the time, around $16 to $18 million. To offset this, they used a lot of product placement. 7-Eleven, Budweiser, Goodyear, and others were more than happy to put money into the production, as long as their products were featured prominently. About $2.5 million came from this. The studio made a deal with 7-Eleven to have official Cannonball Run Big Gulp cups, and they promptly sold out across the country. Filming started in May of 1980. After the real Cannonball Run, Needham had the van placed into storage. Now that they were doing the movie, he took it out of storage for use in the film. So the van you see in the movie was the same one they used in the last official, real Cannonball Run. The majority of the filming took place in Atlanta, Georgia, Tucson, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada. The Best Western was where the crew stayed during that part of the shoot. The owners were ecstatic they were there and even changed the name on the marquee to the Cannonball Pub. The race started at midnight, so they had to do a lot of night shoots for this part. The pub inside stayed open all night for them. The crew was a bunch of hard-drinking, but also hard-working folks. Not to say some of the cast didn't also have a few too many as well. Dean Martin and Roger Moore tipped a few back, but everyone remained professional, and there were no problems. Although one night they were getting ready to shoot, and a crane fell and crushed a boxer Ferrari. The owner was in the bar drinking and nearly had a heart attack when he saw his flattened car. They had a unique idea for Roger Moore. They wanted him to play the character Seymour, a guy who thought he was Roger Moore, who thought he was James Bond. However, due to legal issues, they couldn't use the name James Bond, so they worked to skirt the legal line as close as possible. They used a gadget-filled Aston Martin and even a James Bond-like theme, which they said they were one note away from being sued by the owners of the franchise. They rented the house Roger Moore was staying in at the beginning, and Reynolds liked it so much, after filming was over, he bought it. Many of the cast only worked a few days since it would be too expensive to keep them all on for the full time. They were really only needed for the beginning and the end. The majority of the film was following the ambulance, so most of the film would be with Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, Farrah Fawcett, and Jack Elam, recreating the cast of the original Cannonball crew. When the cars were speeding or doing stunts, it wasn't the stars driving anyway, but a stuntman or a stuntwoman. This stunt where the motorcycle was driven out the back of a plane was the first time this was ever done. The expensive cars were all on loan or rented out. They didn't purposefully do anything to damage the sports cars, so most of the stunts were with cheaper vehicles, police cars, or expensive car bodies on cheap frames. Captain Chaos was not a last-minute addition. He was always in the script, and DeLuise just made him funnier. Brock Yates has a cameo as the guy explaining the race. The cop that pulls over the ladies was Burt Reynolds' stunt double. Peter Fonda heard about the film and asked if he could be in it. They put him in a cameo towards the end as the leader of the bikers, as an homage to Easy Rider. Hal Needham has a cameo as an EMT. While making the film, they were all having fun. The mood on the set was jovial. Everyone was having a good time, despite the hot weather, dangerous stunts, and long hours. With that many funny people around, there was a ton of ad-libbing. Many times the cast would just do or say something that was much funnier than what was in the script, and they went with it. Needham wanted to share that with the audience to give them all a good laugh at the end. so he compiled some of the best bloopers and outtakes to run alongside the film's credits. This is believed to be the first time a film has ever done this, and it's been ripped off numerous times since. Filming ran for about 35 or 36 days. In the end, they wrecked numerous cars, but got some amazing stunts for the finished film. The film was produced by the Chinese company Golden Harvest and distributed by 20th Century Fox. Both companies were excited about the film. The movie opened on June 19, 1981. It opened in second place, but it had some major competition, with Superman 2 opening in the number 1 spot and Raiders of the Lost Ark in third on its second week. It ended up being a major hit, pulling in over $72 million, making it the third highest domestic grossing film of the year. It made over $160 million worldwide. Ruddy's doctor friend from UCLA saw the movie and was shocked to see Jack Elam. He said, "This is the guy you got to play me?" With Cannonball Run being such a success, Needham was able to pretty much direct whatever he wanted next. And what he wanted was Megaforce. The Cannonball Run did so well, the studio greenlit the sequel, The Cannonball Run 2, which came out in 1984. 1984 was also the same year as Sammy Hagar's I Can't Drive 55, which he wrote in response to a ticket he got going 62 in a 55. The sequel had an even bigger cast, with most of the originals returning, plus new additions of classic actors like Telly Savalas, Don Knotts, Shirley MacLaine, Susan Anton, and Catherine Bach. Frank Sinatra loved the original and asked if he could be in the sequel. With Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. returning, this ended up being a partial Rat Pack reunion. Cannonball Run 2 didn't do as well as the first. It only made about $28 million domestically. Burt Reynolds was offered a substantial amount of money to do Cannonball Run 3, but he turned it down, wanting to focus on doing some more serious roles. They forged ahead without him and made the lesser-known third film in the franchise, Speed Zone, which, on top of the new name, had a different cast, writer, and director. The only returning cast member to tie it back to Cannonball Run was Jamie Farr. While the last official Cannonball Run race was in 1979, other unofficial races took place over the years, but none were affiliated with the original. Many of them still called themselves the Cannonball Run, though. Yates continued working for Car and Driver and did a few more movie scripts. His last script was Bandit, 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 the second of 4 made-for-TV Smokey and the Bandit movies. Hal Needham directed all 4. While the official Cannonball Run races were retired, there were some who wanted it to continue. Rick Doherty, who raced in the previous Cannonball Runs, started the U.S. Express as a successor to the Cannonball Run. Doherty's co-driver was Will Wright, long before his Sims empire. The U.S. Express ran from 1980 to 1983, with the fastest time being 32 hours and 7 minutes. That record held until 2006, when 2 pro drivers, Alex Roy and David Mahar, clocked in at 31 hours, 3 minutes. In the fall of 2019, Arnie Toman and Doug Tabbitt broke the transcontinental record with a time of 27 hours and 25 minutes. It seemed like that was the record that would hold, and barring some bizarre set of circumstances, it would never be broken. Enter the year 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic essentially shut down the planet for a time. Toman and Tabbitt were out in late March and noticed the roads were all empty. They talked about how much faster they could do the race without having to deal with traffic. The next day, they heard someone beat them to the punch with a time of 26 hours, 38 minutes. Other drivers were gearing up to do the race, seeing this as an opportunity that would never present itself again. The officials urged people not to do the race, but it was just too good to let go. Racing champion Fred Ashmore Jr. modified a 2019 Mustang GT, removed the seats, and replaced the gas tank with a 130-gallon oversized one. He tried to get a co-driver, but after being repeatedly turned down, he decided to do it alone. He made it to the end with an insane record of 25 hours and 55 minutes. He only had to stop once for gas. Not to be outdone, Toman and Tabbitt wanted to give it a shot. They modified an Audi S6 to look like an undercover Ford Taurus police cruiser. The disguise worked because they passed by a few cops along the way, but they were never pulled over or pursued. They set a new record of 25 hours and 39 minutes. Short of another disaster, it most likely will be impossible to ever beat the current time. This was a condensed version of the various Cannonball races throughout the years. There's simply too much history to cover in just one video. If you want to know more, I suggest you check out Brock Yates' book, Cannonball, World's Greatest Outlaw Road Race. The upcoming film Ferrari is based on Yates' book, Enzo Ferrari, The Man in the Machine. It's being helmed by Michael Mann, and the film's been a passion project that he's been trying to make for over 2 decades. Sadly, Yates died of Alzheimer's on October 5, 2016, shortly before his 83rd birthday. To honor his legacy, he was inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 2017. The spiritual successor to the Cannonball Run is now Tire Rack One Lap of America and is being run by Brock Yates Jr., in the spirit of his road pioneer father. The Cannonball Run is one of the great comedies from the 80s and just an insane who's who of celebrities from the time. It's clear everyone's having a ball and just enjoying the absurdity of the moment. While the stunts may not look that insane today, this is from over 40 years ago, and most of these stunts had never been done before. I think it's also important to show just how big of a star Burt Reynolds was. I remember back when Striptease was coming out, and it ended up being called Burt Reynolds' big comeback film after a series of flops. While Striptease didn't do well, it was the shot in the arm Burt's career needed and helped him get back in the spotlight. Although, interestingly enough, Striptease was originally intended as a vehicle to further push Demi Moore ahead, with her getting $12.5 million for the film, making her the highest paid actress at the time. Striptease led to him getting the role of Jack Horner in Boogie Nights, which won him a Golden Globe as well as an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. He still hates the movie, despite it revitalizing his career. He regretted making it, and refuses to talk about it in interviews. Cannonball Run is a classic for a reason. Everyone in it is giving their all, and it shows. The jokes are funny, the stunts are amazing, the directing is fantastic, and it's such a joy to watch. A large part of the entertainment comes from seeing these real stunts. I know it's embellished for comedic purposes, but it's still crazy to think that this was based on an actual event. In 2011, Needham said you could take this script today and still make it a hit. I disagree. Part of the beauty of the movie is that you couldn't redo it today. If they did it now, they wouldn't have characters with the same chemistry, the stunts would all be CG, and the jokes would be neutered. Better to leave it alone as a hilarious time capsule that's just as funny today as it was 40 years ago.
I mean, why were you laughing? Because he laughed and you hit me.